officer school was a little different than, if you're going through as an airman, but it was a lot of marching, a lot of regulations, a lot of bed making, and a lot of demerits and detentions. And you complete the thing, it was, 90 days, and then I finished that in February of 1970, got married in the 4 days off, and we went down to pilot training. After that, in a year, 13 months later, you graduate from pilot training. So pilot training, I wound up in C-130s. So from there, from from Randolph Air Force Base in Texas, I went to Little Rock Air Force Base for the basic training of the C-130. From there to Pope Air Force Base for the specialized missions. That's dropping paratroopers and other things out of the airplane. And from there, I went to survival school at Fairchild. And from there to jungle school in the Philippines, to Tonsanute Air Base, where I was going to be assigned. And shortly after I got over there, President Nixon pulled 10,000 troops out of Vietnam, put them on the island of Taiwan. And so my entire outfit moved to Taiwan. We had like Quonset huts and 8-10 people to a billet. And we processed in there, did 3 days on the island of Taiwan, and was sent back into Vietnam. But we didn't count anymore because we were no longer permanently assigned there. We were on what was called temporary duty. Good news was you got $8 a day for it. We flew everywhere because the airplane I was in and the crew that I was on, we had the pilot was a major, the navigator was a major, the flight engineer was a chief master sergeant, the load master was a senior master sergeant, and Second Lieutenant McNichols was the co-pilot. So I was the junior guy in the crew. And we had some fairly specialized missions, but we flew everywhere. I think if there was an airfield over 2,000 feet in Vietnam, we landed on it, and to include the big ones, like that everybody hears of, but we were going in places that didn't exist and doing things that didn't happen. So, but it was, I don't want to use the word exciting, it was a job, and there was the old adage, keep your head down and pass the ammo, and that applies in airplanes too. Just do your damn job and don't get shot. It was primarily hauling cargo, but we also moved troops around. And so there was one night we were going into a place called Khartoum, and the Marines were being overrun. So we came into land, and they had B-52s bombing the two sides of the runway. So we'd get the airplane in to get the Marines, who were the last 20 or 30, out. And we came down, turned the airplane around, engines running, the back door open, all the Marines hopped in, and we took off again. And I can remember we had to do a blackout landing so nobody could see us coming in. And I was smoking my Marlboros back then, and I lit my Marlboro up, and my pilot says to me, "Hey kid, you nervous?" I go, "No, I'm not." He goes, "Look at your cigarette." I had inhaled it so hard it was a red ember on the filter. And I go, maybe I am. That's the only war story I tell my kids. But it was, hey, we got them out. They were happy. We were happy. We lived through it. Otherwise, you're hauling cargo around. But I took prisoners to Conson Island. I've been the third airplane ever on the island of Diego Garcia. When we landed on it, it was a coral reef. First airplane went in, blew his tires. Second airplane came in with tires, but not enough for him and the other guy. We came in with an airplane full of tires because they were going to keep bringing in airplanes with concrete on it so they could build a smoother runway. But now it's basically an international airport. It's 1,100 miles south of India, in the middle of the Indian Ocean. If you missed it, you were out of luck. That's why the really senior guys who knew what they were doing went to it. But it was different. And we do X number of days in Vietnam, and when you hit 330 hours of flying time, couldn't fly anymore, so they'd send you back to Taiwan. And it'd be like a day or two, and then they bring you back in again. We had a 22,000-pound bomb in the C-130s called the Daisy Cutter. It was supposed to, with the telescoping armament thing, supposed to drop in and level all the trees so the helicopters could land. And that was its stated goal. But there were times it was dropped because there were a whole bunch of people there too. So it was pretty effective. If nothing else, it blew out eardrums within 5 miles. I remember one time we landed at Da Nang. We got out of the airplane, went into this place to do some paperwork, and the mortar attack started, and one of the 3 airplanes that was parked outside was blown up. Boom, gone. Went outside and go, whoa, I'll go back to the other base and pick up another airplane. But it wasn't constant, I guess, is the real difference. But combat in and of itself isn't constant. There's, hours and hours of boredom, and then interspersed with the sheer terror of it all. So, I can remember we were in the theater, and the movie Jane Fonda, Barbarella, was out. And it was coming up to the part where there's a skin, and the base alerting system was going off saying mortars are coming to you. So you can hear the mortars walking in. So we're all under the seats, which is our tactic. But they're all starting to take off their clothes, and I'm there, and everybody's got their head up, and I poke my buddy. I go, "This is really stupid." But there's 500 guys that were going. That's what was I, 23? You're not thinking clearly then. In Vietnam, I flew Bob Hope so Christmas of '71, from Da Nang Air Base to Ben Hoa Air Base for the big show. If you look on the little TV ads where they do the Bob Hope specials, and they're showing them over there, for 1.5 nanoseconds, I'm the front one on the left row at Ben Hoa. But my roommate, and to this day, we still chat, he had Raquel Welch, Suzanne Plachette, and Joey Heatherton on his airplane, and I got stinking Bob Hope. Oh, there was many times that the airplane got shut up. It was pretty much armor plated except for the two seats, and guys would steal sewer caps to put them underneath the seats. And I remember one time, because the co-pilot if you got shot up, co-pilot got sent out to count the holes, but after you go to 100 or whatever, you always count. And so I would say numerous holes in the right wing. But the airplane was so well designed, they had foam in the fuel tanks so that if a bullet came in, it didn't explode. I mean, that's a real war horse. That's why I think it's the most popular airplane in the world. They're everywhere. And I forget what model they're up to. I flew A's, B's, and E's, and I think they're up to U's now. After Vietnam, I came to KC-135s at Plattsburgh. You train in California, then you come back to Plattsburgh. I did that for 7 years, then to the FB-111, then back to the KC-135 again. And then I deployed to Saudi Arabia. I had 5 bases in 4 countries, and the 5,000 plus people, and that's where we lost the one guy, but it was interesting. I'll tell you a quick war story from that one. When in Riyadh, the main base, the capital of Saudi Arabia, we had a Saudi security guy who was a crown prince that would go to the base exchange and was stealing candy bars. Now he's a multi-millionaire. I said, "Don't do that or we'll arrest you." "You can't arrest me, I'm a crown prince." I go, "You do it again, I'm going to arrest you." So he does it again, they call me up. I come over there with my security commander, Major Watkins, I think was his name. So we arrest the crown prince. We bring him over to my office, and I sit there and go, maybe I ought to call somebody on the Saudi side of this thing. So I call up the Saudi Air Ministry of Defense and say, "This is Colonel McNichols. If somebody of equal or greater rank comes over here, I'll be happy to hand this guy over to you." 35 minutes later comes this entourage of black limos with flags flying. Turned out my counterpart was, he was the former King Faisal. He was Prince Faisal at that point. So he was the senior crown prince, and he was coming over to take care of his nephew. So we go in and we sit down and we have tea and coffee, and I say, "Look, as far as I told him, I warned him, and I can't do it because the other kids see the chief of security doing this stuff." And he said, "As far as I'm concerned, this is a family problem. He's all yours." So we thank each other. We have our tea and we do all that stuff. He leaves. I sit there and go, maybe I ought to call my commanding general who's back in the States. So I call up this guy, and he's ripping me a new one. I mean, he's screaming and yelling. I'm holding the phone out here type thing. And I go, "Well, that's all right. I'll be home for Christmas." And 30 minutes later, this general calls me up and says, "I just wanted to tell you what a great job you did." And I'm going, "Hey, what the hell's going on here?" Prince Faisal called the Secretary of State, who was a college buddy of his. They're Dartmouth graduates, who called the Secretary of Defense saying what a great job this colonel did for the royal Saudi family. I go, I can't even get thrown out of a war. But it was true. So then I'm feeling pretty cocky, and so I call up my kids who were back here, and one of my buddies owns 100 acres up near Shazy Lake. And I said, "I need a Christmas tree for over here." So they cut down a 45-foot tree up there near Shazy Lake. We put it on a KC-135 here. I put my own security people on board because we fly it into England, and you can't get an apple into England if you've ever been there. I mean, customs and all those, but my cops surrounded the airplane, said classified cargo, wouldn't let them in. We fly it into Saudi Arabia. We have built a base for this thing already. Bill McBride car dealership paid for all the lights. All the school districts did the little decorations for it. And so I meet the airplane out on the Saudi flight line, and the Saudis, it's like a Ben-Hur movie where the water's partying. They see me coming, and these guys are spreading like ants. And so I say, classified cargo, we'll sign for the airplane. We put it in a tractor-trailer truck. Our dining hall was a tent, held 4,000 people. So we had this giant concrete base. Up goes a 45-foot tree with the lights on it and all the decorations. I find the 18-year-old youngest kid in the outfit to come over to light it. So on Christmas Eve, we light the first Christmas tree in Saudi because it's sacred soil, if you would. I'll put quotes around that. So we have this Christmas tree up there. Everybody's really excited with it. And I go, that's pretty good. I get called by the Crown Prince. He says, you have a religious symbol on our sacred ground. I said, no, sir. Your country's very hot. That's a shade tree. Now, he's laughing so hard that I understand that I won that little partay. And he says, it will be shady tomorrow. I said, I understand. So we took the tree down after one day, but it's the first time a significant Christmas tree was in Saudi Arabia. So then we decide, because we had pallets everywhere, the place was, well, it was a wartime footing, so I said, we got to clean up this place. So we all those wooden pallets, so we built this thing out in the field, 120 foot tall of wooden pallets that you ship cargo on. Put the tray on the top of it, doused it with gasoline, had all the fire trucks around it, and I found this young, I think she was a 19-year-old female, and she got to take the flare and throw it into the pile, and we lit this thing up, and people were saying you could see it from space. Well, it was this giant flame in the middle of the desert, and it's all blacked out, and all of a sudden this thing, so I get called by him again. He goes, you're burning the sacred soil, and I go, no, sir, I'm cleaning up your base, and I brought him over and showed him the base. He sent out the edict to every other base to have a bonfire to clean them up, because it did clean the whole place up. So it was those are my war stories from there. I flew 39 missions in Gulf One. Well, it was over before I got there, but it was one of those things that it was a non-event after the first 10 days. The biggest threat we had was all the Navy guys that were up there flying because they can't keep on their altitude, and so we'd be up there looking for, let's not get hit by a fellow airplane. Because I think we had 4,000 airplanes in the airspace in New Jersey. Well, they weren't all mine, but if everybody's up flying, it was a lot of airplanes in the middle of nowhere.
The last 2 years you were in D.C., can you tell me more of what happened?
Well, the reinventing the government thing, the first project I worked on there, we took 13 federal agencies, eliminated them, and slammed them into one. So the National Intelligence Agency came out of Defense Mapping, Central Imaging Office, a couple of sections of the CIA, a couple of sections of the Army, a couple of sections of the Air Force. And so they slammed all the intelligence assets into one thing, and I was the military rep on that thing. A whole bunch of civilians and me. And because I was the guy that had to sign the paperwork saying you no longer are in the Central Imaging Office, you're in a holding pattern until we come up with this new agency. And we'd brief that to the Vice President on a monthly basis. That happened, and then in D.C., they thought if you worked 10 hours a day, you got every Friday off, so I would fly home on weekends because I left the family up here because the kids were still in high school. And so I commuted to D.C. And too many cars down there, too many people that you can't trust what they say. I mean, not a bad place to live, some great restaurants and a lot of things to do, but man.
What was Al Gore like?
I gotta phrase this correctly. I always thought he was not paying attention, but one time I briefed him, and it was like a 15-minute briefing, and I thought when I left there that I just wasted my time, and he walked out into the other room, and we were in the situation room down in the basement, and he walked into another one where the TV crews was. He gave a 5-minute presentation to where he hit what I said about 100% accurately without a note. I went, he was listening. So, like I said, he was the smarter of the two, but nice guy, but, they're so busy, they know you for the briefing because you got a name tag on, and then, he can look at you the next day and he looks at you and absolutely clueless that you're the guy that briefed him the day before. But in deference to him, he deals with so damn many people that it's just coming at him time after time after time. Never saw I saw Clint playing golf a couple of times, but that was it.